Oh, look at you, still breathing, still standing, still here. And that right there is the plot twist they never saw coming, because they threw everything at you, didn't they? Everything. The drama, the chaos, the manufactured emergencies, the weaponized conversations, the guilt trips wrapped in concern, the public humiliation disguised as jokes, the silent treatments designed to make you beg, the explosions meant to make you flinch. They orchestrated a whole circus, painted themselves ringmaster, assigned you the role of broken clown, and you beautiful, untouchable force of nature. You did something so devastating, so unforgivable, so absolutely nuclear, that they're still trying to process it 3 months later. You yawned. Not a polite yawn, not a hidden yawn, a full, slow, unbothered, soul-deep yawn that said, "Is this really all you've got?" without a single word leaving your lips. And then, and then, you did the unthinkable. You walked away. Not stormed, not ran, not collapsed. Walked, casually. Like their entire performance was a commercial break you didn't care to sit through. No explanation, no defense, no final speech. Just the sound of your footsteps, getting quieter, while their world got louder with panic. And now, right now, as you're watching this, they're somewhere losing their absolute minds because the script flipped, and nobody taught them how to handle a main character who refuses to play. Let me take you back to that moment, that sacred, devastating moment, when you became untouchable without even trying, because they had it all planned out, didn't they? They knew exactly how it was supposed to go. They'd push, you'd react, they'd accuse, you'd defend, they'd create chaos, you'd scramble to fix it. They'd play victim, you'd apologize. They'd set the trap, you'd walk right in, panic in your eyes, words tumbling out, desperate to prove your innocence, to make them understand, to fix what they broke on purpose. That was the game. That was always the game. Your pain was their power. Your reaction was their fuel. Your emotional breakdown was their highlight reel, their proof that they still mattered, that they could still make you feel, that you still cared enough to hurt. They needed you on your knees. They needed you crying. They needed you small. And for a while, maybe you were. Maybe you gave them that. Maybe you played the part they wrote for you, starring in their drama, hitting your marks, delivering your lines right on cue. But something shifted, didn't it? Something deep, something quiet, something permanent. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was clarity. Maybe you just finally saw through the smoke and mirrors and realized you were fighting shadows, arguing with people who weren't listening, crying for people who were taking notes, breaking for people who were collecting your pieces as trophies. So when they came at you again, locked and loaded with their usual arsenal, the guilt, the blame, the twisted narratives, the fake urgency, the manufactured crisis designed to make you drop everything and prove you still cared, something inside you just stopped. Not broke, stopped. Like a machine that finally realized it was never supposed to run on that fuel. They were mid-sentence, mid-performance, mid-manipulation, expecting the usual song and dance, the panic, the defense, the scrambling, the begging for understanding. And instead, you looked at them, really looked, not with anger, not with hurt, with something so much worse, boredom, complete, soul-crushing, spirit-breaking boredom. Your face didn't even change. Your heartbeat didn't even spike. You just yawned, slow, deliberate, like their best material was a rerun you'd seen 47 times and couldn't even pretend to care about anymore. And in that yawn, in that single moment of absolute nonchalance, you destroyed 5 years of their psychological infrastructure. Because that yawn, that wasn't disrespect. That was indifference. And indifference, real indifference, is the only thing narcissists, manipulators, drama addicts, emotional vampires, chaos creators cannot survive. You can fight them, they'll fight back. You can hate them, they'll feed on it. You can love them, They'll weaponize it, but bore them. Show them they don't even register as interesting anymore. Show them that their best performance doesn't even warrant a reaction. That's the kill shot they never recover from. And then you walked away. Oh, the walk. The legendary, iconic, untouchable walk. Not a dramatic exit. No slammed doors, no shouted declarations, no tears streaming down your face while you deliver some movie monologue they can twist later. Just movement. One foot in front of the other, steady, unhurried, like you were leaving a room where someone was telling a boring story, not ending a relationship, not walking away from years of history, not severing ties they thought were chains. You didn't even look back. Not once. Because looking back would have implied they were worth the neck turn, worth the final glance, worth any indication that you cared about their reaction. You didn't. You don't. And that is what broke them. See, they expected rage. They planned for rage. They had 17 speeches prepared for your rage, victim cards ready to play, witnesses on standby, screenshots loaded, narratives crafted, ready to paint you as the villain the second you snapped. They needed you to snap. Your rage would have been their redemption arc. Your breakdown would have been their proof that they were right all along, that you were unstable, that you were the problem, that they were justified in every manipulation, every lie, every tactic. But you didn't give them rage. You gave them nothing. Absolutely nothing. No fuel, no content, no material to work with. You became a blank wall they kept throwing paint at, and every color just slid off, hit the floor, left them standing there covered in their own mess, wondering why it wasn't sticking anymore. Now, let's talk about what happened after. Because this is where it gets beautiful, where it gets poetic, where the universe itself seemed to take notes because you walked away and suddenly their entire ecosystem collapsed like a sandcastle at high tide. First came the confusion. They stood there, frozen, mid-script, mid-manipulation, dialogue prepared, tactics ready, and you were just gone. Physically gone. Emotionally gone. Energetically gone. They sent the messages. You didn't open them. They made the calls. You didn't answer. They showed up. You weren't there. They tried the guilt trips. You didn't book the flight. They played victim. You weren't in the audience. They staged emergencies. You didn't come running. For the first time in years, maybe ever, their chaos had no audience. Their drama had no supporting cast. Their manipulation had no target. And without you there to react, to respond, to care, to fix, to save, to explain, to defend, to break, they had to sit with themselves. Just themselves. No distraction. No supply. No mirror to reflect the version of reality they needed to believe. Just them and the echo of their own emptiness. And that silence, that absence, that complete lack of you drove them absolutely insane because they realized something terrifying. Without your reaction, they're not interesting. Without your pain, they're not powerful. Without your attention, they're not even real. Then came the second phase, the performance phase. Because manipulators, drama addicts, emotional terrorists, they don't just accept defeat, they escalate. They performed for mutual friends, painted themselves victims of your cruelty, your coldness, your sudden inexplicable change. They told stories, twisted timelines, edited conversations, rewrote history, crafted narratives where they were saints and you were a monster who just left for no reason. Out of nowhere, proof of your instability, your lack of loyalty, your dark heart. They posted cryptic things online, vague enough for plausible deniability, specific enough for anyone who knew to understand it was about you. They waited for you to break silence, to defend yourself, to tell your side, to clear your name, to fight for your reputation, to prove you weren't what they said you were. And you just kept living. Posting sunsets, smiling in photos, thriving visibly. Not one word about them, not one hint of drama, Not one passive-aggressive quote, not one explanation, not one defense. You were out here acting like they never existed, like those years were a prologue you skipped, like their entire campaign to destroy you was a fly you brushed off without looking. And that silence, that refusal to engage, that absolute lack of acknowledgement that made their stories sound desperate. Because if you're not defending yourself, if you're not even bothered enough to address it, then maybe, just maybe, their version isn't the truth. Maybe you know something they don't. Maybe you have the real receipts and you're just not showing them because they're not even worth the effort. The third phase, this is where they started unraveling publicly because by now, weeks have passed, maybe months, and you're still fine. Better than fine. Glowing, peaceful, unbothered, successful, happy, healed. And they're falling apart. Their new supply isn't hitting the same. Their new targets aren't as reactive. Their chaos isn't as effective. Their manipulation isn't landing because you were the one who made them feel powerful. You were the one who responded to their tactics. You were the one who cared enough to hurt. You were the narcissistic supply, the emotional fuel, the mirror that reflected their false self back to them in a way that made them feel real. Without you, they're just screaming into a void. And people notice. Mutual friends start seeing the cracks. The constant victim routine gets old. The never-ending drama becomes exhausting. The stories stop adding up, and slowly, quietly, people start asking questions. They start noticing that you're not the common denominator. That every story involves someone else being crazy, someone else being wrong, someone else abandoning them for no reason. They notice you never speak ill, you never defend, you never engage. You just exist, peacefully, while this person continues to spiral, continues to obsess, continues to talk about you months after you stop saying their name. And that makes people think. But here's what they'll never understand. What their chaos-wired brains cannot compute. What drives them insane every single night when they're alone with their thoughts. You didn't leave because you hated them. You didn't leave because you wanted revenge. You didn't leave to hurt them. You left because they stopped being real. Somewhere in all their performance, all their manipulation, all their masks and scripts and tactics, the actual human, if there ever was one, disappeared. You weren't arguing with a person anymore. You were arguing with a strategy. You weren't loving a human. You were feeding a machine. And the moment you realized that, the moment you saw the emptiness behind the eyes, the hollow behind the words, the void behind the chaos, you couldn't unsee it. And you can't fight a void. You can't fix an emptiness. You can't heal someone who isn't actually there. So you stop trying. You stop playing. You stop participating in a game you didn't even sign up for. You chose yourself. You chose peace. You chose sanity. You chose a future where your energy goes to things that grow, not things that consume. You chose silence over their noise. You chose absence over their presence. You chose nothing over their everything. And that choice, that simple, devastating choice to just stop, broke their entire system. Now, let's talk about you, about what you became in that silence. Because while they were spiraling, performing, manipulating, obsessing, you were doing something they can't even comprehend. You were healing, quietly, privately, without an audience, without updates, without a redemption arc they could follow. You processed years of pain they inflicted. You untangled the knots they tied in your mind. You removed the programming they installed. You questioned the beliefs they fed you. You unlearned the patterns they trained into you. You remembered who you were before them. And slowly, piece by piece, breath by breath, day by day, you rebuilt yourself from the foundation up, not the version they wanted, Not the version they needed, not the version that would ever go back. The real you, the unbothered you, the unshakable you. The you that can watch their tactics and feel nothing because you studied the blueprint, you see the wires, you know the game, you understand the script, and you're just not interested in performing anymore. You know what real connection feels like now. You know what healthy looks like. You know what peace feels like. You know what genuine love, friendship, respect actually feels like. And their counterfeit version, their manufactured intimacy, their performance art relationship, their chaos disguised as passion, looks so cheap now, so obvious, so embarrassingly transparent that you can't believe you ever fell for it. And the confidence, oh, the confidence that came with that clarity, because you're not walking around defensive anymore, waiting for the next attack, the next accusation, the next guilt trip, the next manufactured emergency. You're not rehearsing explanations in your head. You're not preparing defenses for crimes you didn't commit. You're not preemptively apologizing for existing. You're just existing, freely, loudly, unapologetically. And people notice. They notice the lightness, the ease, the genuine smile, the real laugh, the peace that radiates from you like you're carrying sunlight in your chest. They notice you're not complaining, you're not venting, you're not trauma dumping, you're not seeking validation. You're just good, solid, whole, like someone who survived something they're too dignified to discuss. And that quiet strength, that unspoken resilience, that unbothered energy makes you magnetic in ways their chaos never could. Because healthy people, real people, people with substance, they're attracted to peace. They're drawn to stability. They're magnetized by people who don't need saving, don't need fixing, don't need constant validation, who just exist confidently in their own skin. You became that. You became the person they tried to destroy. And instead of becoming destroyed, you became untouchable. Meanwhile, back in their world, things are getting desperate, because enough time has passed now that they can't pretend anymore. They can't pretend you're coming back. They can't pretend you still care. They can't pretend their new supply is working. They can't pretend they're fine. The mask is cracking. The performance is exhausting. The lies are getting harder to keep straight. They're watching your life from whatever distance they can, through mutual friends, through social media, through breadcrumbs of information they gather like a detective obsessed with a cold case. And every update destroys them. You got a promotion. You traveled somewhere beautiful. You're in a healthy relationship. You made new friends. You're thriving. You're happy. You're succeeding. You're doing all the things they said you'd never do without them, that you needed them to achieve, that you were too weak, too broken, too damaged to accomplish alone. And every win, every smile, every peaceful moment you have is evidence that they were the problem. Not you. Never you. Them. Their chaos. Their manipulation. Their toxicity. You weren't broken. You were breaking under their weight. You weren't weak. You were exhausted from carrying them. You weren't the problem. You were the solution they kept sabotaging because your healing meant their exposure. Let's talk about the moment they try to come back. Because they will. They always do. It might be months. It might be years. But eventually, when their new supply dries up, when their tactics stop working, when they're alone with the consequences of their choices, they'll reach out. It'll be wrapped in false humility, coated in fake growth, disguised as an apology that's really just bait. They'll say they've changed. They'll say they understand now. They'll say they're sorry, not for what they did, but for how you felt about what they did. They'll list the therapy appointments like credentials. They'll reference self-help books like homework. They'll perform vulnerability like a scripted monologue. And they'll wait. Wait for you to soften. Wait for you to forgive. Wait for you to give them one more chance, because that's what you always did before. Because you're kind, you're understanding, you believe in second chances, you believe people can change. But here's the difference. You're not the same person they left behind. You're not the person they manipulated. You're not the person who yawned and walked away. You're the person who stayed away, who built a life they're not in, who found peace they can't touch, who healed wounds they kept reopening. You've seen behind the curtain. You know the tricks. You recognize the patterns. You understand the game. And you're not interested in playing. Not even for nostalgia. Not even for closure. Not even to prove you've changed. Because you don't need to prove anything to someone who never saw you clearly in the first place. So when they reach out, if they reach out, you'll do something that would have seemed impossible back then, something that feels effortless now. You'll either ignore it completely, or you'll respond with such polite detachment, such emotional distance, such clear boundaries, that they'll immediately know you're not the same. They can't reach you. The door isn't just closed, it's sealed, locked, reinforced. And they're standing outside in the rain, knocking on a wall, wondering why you're not answering, not understanding that you soundproofed your life against their frequency. You don't hate them. You don't even think about them. They're just nothing. A lesson learned. A chapter closed. A version of yourself you outgrew. And that indifference, that genuine, unbothered, peaceful indifference, is the final death blow to whatever hope they had of ever mattering to you again. Because hate means they still affect you. Anger means they still have power. But indifference, real indifference, means they're irrelevant. Forgotten, a ghost haunting a house you don't live in anymore. And there's no coming back from that. No manipulation tactic. No guilt trip. No performance. Nothing they can do or say will ever make them matter to you again. Because you evolved past them. You transcended the level they're stuck on. You're playing a completely different game on a completely different board in a completely different dimension, and they're still stuck in the tutorial level wondering why their cheat codes don't work anymore. Here's what they'll never tell you. What they'll never admit. What keeps them up at night when everyone else is asleep. You haunt them. Not because you're trying to. Not because you're sending signs or posting cryptic messages or playing mind games. You haunt them because you're proof. Proof that they're